History likes to paint Egyptian pharaohs as bronze-skinned gods, men who strode across deserts with the confidence of sunbeams and the swagger of immortals. Their monuments still pierce the sky, and their gold masks still stare down the centuries. But if you peel back the glitter, you'll find something far more human. Hubris, bad luck, and the occasional fatal facepalm. They ruled armies, drained rivers, and commanded cults, but too many met ends that wouldn't look out of place in a slapstick tragedy. The gods they claimed to embody must have laughed. These were not noble deaths on the battlefield or peaceful retirements wrapped in linen. These were blunt force blunders, avoidable infections, palace coups, and desperate gambles gone wrong. Behind every divine cartouche lies a skull with a story, and many of those stories are absurd. This list drags 11 rulers off their pedestals and back into the mess of mortality. From diplomatic disasters to self-inflicted starvation, from snake bites to hippopotamus maulings, their ends prove that even a crown and a pyramid can't save you from your own stupidity. Consider this a tour of Egyptian afterlives by way of terrible decisions. A parade of pharaohs who remind us that power does not equal wisdom, and that the most ridiculous end can make the grandest reign seem like a punchline. Seqenenre-Ta II, sometimes called Seqen-Enra, inherited a country cut in two. In the 17th dynasty, native pharaohs hunkered in Thebes controlled the south, while Hyksos foreigners squatted in the north and slept in Avaris. It was like splitting a company between two feuding CEOs and pretending nothing would explode. Ambitious and young, Seqenenre dreamed of kicking the Hyksos out, but before war was declared, Hyksos king Apophis tossed him a baited complaint. The hippos in Thebes were supposedly so loud they kept Apophis awake hundreds of miles away. Most historians agree it was an insult disguised as diplomacy, a trap to draw the southern pharaoh into enemy territory. Seqenenre took the bait, strolling off to negotiate with the very people he planned to overthrow. When his mummy was unwrapped in 1886, the autopsy told the rest of the story. Massive blunt force trauma, deep gashes from an axe, a spear and a sword, all delivered to his skull. There were no defensive wounds on his arms. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Either he swaggered into the meeting without adequate guards, or he was ambushed during an early skirmish and finished off ritualistically. The multiple weapons embedded in his head may have been Hyksos symbolism, a way of saying, "We killed you in every possible way." His death didn't stop the war, it lit the fuse. His sons Kamos and Amos I picked up the fight and eventually expelled their Hyksos. What Seqenenre's shattered skull still teaches is painfully simple. Don't attend enemy-hosted peace talks unless you're ready to redecorate the afterlife with your own cranium. Gods may whisper, but axes shout. Akhenaten was ancient Egypt's great disruptor, its self-appointed visionary, and possibly its most disastrous fad dieter. When he took the throne in the mid-14th century, BCE, Egypt's religion was a sprawling bureaucracy of gods, temples, and priests. Akhenaten looked at this 1,000-year-old machine and thought, why not tear it down? He shut the temples, gutted the priesthood, moved the capital to a brand new city called Akhetaten, and declared the sun disk Aten the only god. Also, he would be Aten's exclusive spokesperson on earth. To priests of Amun, this was like showing up to work and finding your temple turned into a smoothie bar. The artistic depictions that survive show Akhenaten as physically strange, elongated skull, spindly limbs, wide hips, prompting speculation about genetic disorders like Marfan syndrome or Freilich syndrome. Combine that with the rumors of him being a sun-worshipping workaholic who neglected basic governance, and you get a king who looked less like a warrior and more like a malnourished prophet. Under his watch, Egypt's empire frayed. Pleas for military aid from distant governors went unanswered while he tinkered with hymns and architecture. By the end, he may have been literally starving. He died suddenly. Illness is the most plausible culprit, though some whisper poison or chronic disease. What's certain is that his religious revolution unraveled overnight. His young successor, Tutankhaten, quickly changed his name to Tutankhamun, reopened the temples, and buried Akhenaten's monotheism in the sand. Today, Akhenaten is either hailed as a visionary or cursed as a madman. But one thing's clear, the sun disk couldn't save him from wasting away. You can cancel the gods, but you can't cancel calories. Tutankhamun is the most famous pharaoh on this list, but not because of anything he did while alive. His short reign was defined by other people reversing his father Akhenaten's religious chaos and propping up the fragile boy as a symbol of restoration. Physically, Tutankhamun was a mess. DNA analyses and CT scans suggest he was plagued by malaria, a congenital clubfoot, and possibly a cleft palate. His parents were likely siblings, so his genes read like a warning label. In 1323 BCE, at roughly 18, he died suddenly. Earlier theories blamed a blow to the head or an assassin's blade, but studies of his mummy revealed a broken leg and crushed ribs. Many now believe he crashed a chariot while hunting or at some ceremonial race. Some even suggest he was mauled by a hippopotamus. The chest trauma fits and hippos were notoriously dangerous. Either way, this boy god, whose tomb would stun the world in 1922 with gold masks and treasures, couldn't survive his own hobbies. He was embalmed without his heart, unusual for Egyptian mummification, hinting that his chest was too mangled to preserve. The irony is thick. In life, he was a footnote, a weak puppet undone by a youthful mishap. In death, he became the most famous mummy on earth. His golden mask stares serenely, but the bones beneath whisper a different story. Of a kid who never outgrew his training wheels, thrust onto a throne he couldn't fill, dying in a crash or animal attack that reads like a line from a tragicomic tabloid. Tut's fame proves that sometimes the dumbest end makes you immortal. By the 21st dynasty, Egypt's glory days were fading. The pharaohs still wore crowns, but real power was split between a northern court at Tanis and high priests of Amun in Thebes. Susenus I, his name tangled into Susen in some texts, inherited a divided kingdom and spent his reign juggling priestly politics and foreign threats. He was no Ramses, but he kept the machine running. Yet his undoing wasn't a war or a palace plot. It was his mouth. When archaeologists unwrapped his mummy, they found a jaw ravaged by abscesses, broken teeth, and osteomyelitis, a bone infection that can poison the blood. He likely spent his last years in agony, jaw swollen, every bite a torment. Dental care in ancient Egypt wasn't non-existent. They had rudimentary tooth drills and pain relief, but Susenus apparently missed the memo. This aging pharaoh, with access to gold and skilled artisans, let basic hygiene become his downfall. The infection probably spread through his bloodstream, leading to sepsis and death. For a man who managed to share power with a rival priesthood and navigate foreign intrigues, he was felled by something a competent dentist could have alleviated. His story reads like a cautionary tale scribbled in blood and pus. You can build temples, command armies, juggle priestly factions, and still be undone by neglecting your molars. In a time when pharaohs were supposed to be living gods, Susenus's corpse reminds us that sometimes the divine dies, drooling on a pillow, killed by his own rotting teeth. Ramesses III is often called the last great pharaoh of the New Kingdom. He repelled Libyan invaders and the mysterious sea peoples, built grand monuments, and tried to revive Egypt's sagging fortunes. On paper, he looked like a bronze titan. In his own palace, however, he was oblivious. One of his secondary wives, Queen Taye, sometimes spelled T or Taya, decided her son Penawar deserved the throne more than the designated crown prince. Instead of scheming quietly, she assembled a conspiracy that reads like a soap opera on acid. Servants, scribes, butlers, and even military officers joined her. Their plan: murder Ramesses during the Opet festival in Thebes while he processed in a public celebration. Court documents from the subsequent trial reveal a circus of witchcraft, poisoned wax figurines, and secret letters. The plotters rehearsed spells and smuggled messages baked into pastries. Ramesses' security either missed every red flag or was in on it. When the attack came, it was brutal. CT scans of his mummy show his throat was slit to the bone. Another blow severed his right big toe, perhaps as he tried to flee. He died gurgling his own blood, betrayed by people who shared his dinner table. In death, his attendants tried to cover up the mutilation with bandages, as if cosmetics could hide incompetence. The subsequent harem conspiracy trials recorded confessions wrung under torture. Some conspirators were forced to kill themselves. Others were burned alive. Yet the most glaring lesson is that the pharaoh who could repel invasions couldn't hear the whispers in his own corridors. He ignored the plot in his pillow and paid for it with his throat. Cleopatra, the seventh Philopator, last pharaoh of Egypt, gets romanticized as a femme fatale, but her story is less love story and more high-stakes poker with the Roman Republic. She was brilliant. She spoke multiple languages, including Egyptian, which many Ptolemies didn't bother with, charmed academics, managed economics, and commanded fleets. When her father died, she co-ruled with her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, but court factions forced her into exile. She smuggled herself back into Alexandria wrapped in a carpet to meet Julius Caesar, using her wit and beauty to forge an alliance. Caesar restored her to the throne and fathered her son, Caesarion. When Caesar was murdered, Cleopatra shifted her loyalty to Mark Antony, a Roman strongman whose ambition matched her own. They became lovers, political partners, and an unstoppable tabloid headline. But Rome's mood turned. Octavian, the future Augustus, painted them as decadent traitors. In 31 BCE, at the Battle of Actium, Antony and Cleopatra's fleet was outmaneuvered and scattered. Antony's forces crumbled. Cleopatra fled. Back in Egypt, they staged one last act of melodrama. Antony, misinformed that she was dead, stabbed himself. He botched it and died in her arms. Cleopatra barricaded herself in a mausoleum, weighed her options, humiliation in a Roman triumph or suicide, and chose poison. Legends speak of an asp being smuggled in a basket of figs, its venomous bite delivering her to Osiris. Other sources suggest she used a toxic ointment or a poisoned hairpin. Either way, the woman who dazzled Rome died behind a locked door, her kingdom absorbed into the empire she had gambled on. Cleopatra bet everything on Rome's factional chaos and lost. Her ending is hauntingly human. Even queens running empires sometimes find themselves clutching a snake, whispering a final curse. Amenemhat I, founder of Egypt's 12th dynasty, wasn't born to royalty. He was a commoner who climbed the military ladder, seized power around 1991 BCE, and dragged Egypt out of chaos into a golden middle kingdom. He moved the capital north to Ichtawi, restored irrigation, reorganized administration, and co-ruled with his son, Senusret I, building a stable succession. But all that competence couldn't save him from his own bedroom. Two ancient literary works, the Instructions of Amenemhat and the Story of Sinuhe, suggest that after dinner one night, he retired to his chamber and fell asleep. In his dream, he warned his son never to get too comfortable. When he woke, it was to steal in the dark. It was an attack of the bodyguard, he supposedly said, lamenting that he'd been like a snake of the necropolis. Whether the conspiracy was politically motivated or just treacherous opportunism, Amenemhat didn't have a chance. He reached for his weapons too late. In the dark, alone, even a pharaoh is just flesh. His murder is the first recorded assassination of an Egyptian king. It reads like a parable of success breeding complacency. A self-made ruler who micromanaged canals and taxes, but didn't watch his own door. Senusret rushed home, crushed the conspirators and reigned long and well, but his father's ghost remained. Amenemhat's lesson, etched in dagger wounds, is as brutal as it is simple. Never fall asleep on the throne. Menkaure, the script's Manare, builder of the smallest of the three great pyramids at Giza, often gets portrayed as the nice guy of the Old Kingdom. Ancient historian Herodotus wrote centuries later that Menkaure reversed some of his tyrannical father Khafre's policies and ruled with a lighter hand. Whether that's propaganda or truth, his name survived with an unusual veneer of kindness for a monarch of that era. That doesn't mean he escaped divine irony. According to legend, an oracle prophesied that Menkaure would die young. Determined to cheat fate, he supposedly lit lamps and feasted all night long, effectively doubling his days by banishing darkness. He partied through dusk, perhaps hoping the gods wouldn't notice the calendar if he never slept. This strategy is either poetic genius or the nutritional equivalent of shooting yourself in the liver. Historically, his reign was stable, but shorter than expected, and his pyramid remained unfinished at his death. The likeliest culprit wasn't a curse, but disease. Some scholars point to evidence of a sudden epidemic, possibly plague, sweeping through the royal court. Menkaure's early death forced his son Shepseskaf to complete the pyramid quickly, leaving it smaller and simpler than planned. If the prophecy story holds any truth, it adds a grim punchline. The pharaoh who tried to outrun mortality by turning night into day may have simply burned the candle at both ends until there was nothing left. His pyramid still stands, elegant and modest beside its colossal neighbors, a monument to ambition, optimism, and denial. He reminds us that you can build to the heavens and still be felled by microbes, prophecies, or your own exhaustion. Fate laughs at schedules. Long before pyramids pierced the sky, a semi-mythical ruler called Menes, often identified with Narmer or his successor Horaha, unified Upper and Lower Egypt and founded the first dynasty. He took a land of warring nomes and stitched it into a single kingdom, then set about building a capital at Memphis and establishing the pharaonic institution. Manetho, a 3rd century BCE Egyptian priest, claimed Menes reigned for 62 years and then met a fate straight out of a bad cartoon. He was carried off and killed by a hippopotamus. Hippos were sacred to the god set and feared for their aggression. They could outrun humans and bite a boat in half. To die beneath one was both mundane and mythic. Imagine the first king of a unified civilization, master of the Nile's floods and commander of thousands, meeting his end flailing in a marsh because an angry river cow decided he looked like lunch. It's a perfect collision of grandeur and absurdity. Scholars debate the historicity of Manetho's claim. Menes's identity and even his existence are cloudy. But the legend persists because it's irresistible. The unifier of Egypt, so powerful he could create a nation, reduced to hippo chow. It's both cosmic justice and cosmic comedy. It also hints at the dangers lurking in Egypt's lifeblood. The Nile was not just a highway and a blessing. It was full of creatures that didn't care about crowns. Whether Menes was Narmer, Horaha, or an amalgam, the story stands as a warning. Divine kingship means nothing if you ignore the beasts at your feet. In the end, the god king bled into the river, and the hippo swam on, unimpressed. Fast forward to the dying days of ancient Egypt, and you'll find Ptolemy XIII Theos Philopator, a teenager thrust onto the throne in 51 BCE, alongside his sister Cleopatra VII. Their father's will forced them to co-rule, but Ptolemy's advisors, the eunuch Pothinus, the general Achilles, and tutor Theodotus, treated him like a puppet and maneuvered to sideline Cleopatra. Civil war erupted. Cleopatra fled to Syria to raise an army. Meanwhile, Roman politics spilled into Egypt when Pompey arrived seeking asylum after losing to Julius Caesar. Ptolemy's court welcomed Pompey onto Egyptian soil and promptly assassinated him, hoping to curry favor with Caesar. Instead, Caesar was disgusted and seized control. Cleopatra famously had herself smuggled into his palace, wrapped in a carpet, and charmed him into reinstating her as co-ruler. Ptolemy fumed and took up arms. The siblings' feud became part of Rome's civil war. In 47 BCE, at the Battle of the Nile, Caesar outmaneuvered the teenage pharaoh. Defeated, Ptolemy tried to flee across the river, but in the chaos, he drowned. He was 15, laden with gold armor, and likely weighed down by heavy robes. Some accounts describe his boat capsizing. Others suggest he jumped into the river in full regalia and sank like a stone. It's a fittingly pathetic end for a boy king whose idea of diplomacy involved beheading Romans and trusting eunuchs. He spent his short life alternately manipulated and lashing out, only to be swallowed by the very river that nourished his kingdom. Ptolemy XIII's body was pulled from the Nile and buried hastily. Egypt passed to Cleopatra and her even younger brother Ptolemy XIV. The drowned monarch became a footnote, remembered mostly as a plot device in Cleopatra's story. His demise is both tragic and absurd. A teenager who thought he could play chess with Caesar but couldn't even swim. Our final tale loops back to Amenemhat I because his assassination deserves its own haunted spotlight. This was a man who pulled Egypt out of the first intermediate period's mud and rebuilt it into a Middle Kingdom powerhouse. Born a commoner, he maneuvered through military ranks, toppled the fractious 11th dynasty, and ruled for 3 decades. He established Ichtawi as a new administrative heart, reformed taxation and law, sponsored literature like The Tale of the Eloquent Peasant, and instituted co-regency to secure succession. Yet behind the success was paranoia. He was so aware of mortal danger that he supposedly authored the Instructions of Amenemhat, advising his son never to trust anyone. Ironically, he didn't follow his own advice. One night, after a pleasant supper, he retired, weary but content. He scrambled for his weapons but found none. His son Senusret was away campaigning and could not help. Ancient accounts describe him realizing too late that there is none mighty in the night. The first self-made pharaoh to implement co-regency fell to a dagger in the dark. His murder didn't destabilize Egypt. Senusret hurried home, executed the traitors, and continued the dynasty. But Amenemhat's ghost hangs over every palace plot from Ramses III to Cleopatra. He personifies the ultimate leadership irony, the strong man slain by his own hand-picked protectors. The man who warned others about treachery forgot to lock his door. If there's a moral to draw from these 11 tales of divine idiots, it's that hubris, neglect, and bad luck are more lethal than any invading army. Kings may build pyramids, but they still bleed.